Stacy joined the PACRN in about 2014. So we sit on the PACRN board together. She's the president of the East Run Hellbenders Society, and she's an elected supervisor in Grant Township. So she has a full plate and has managed to lead the fight in Grant Township for fighting the injection well that they want to put in a town of 700 people that all live with well water. And that being said, I'm going to let Stacy go on with her story. She does not have internet service in Grant Township, so Marky is going to has set up a slideshow with beautiful pictures of her.
Good Lord. Yes, thank you. Thanks, Marky, for providing a visual. That's really kind of you, and thanks for using your technology to kind of push my bottom through this little talk. Before I get started, I would like to introduce Cad Nicholson, who is also on the call. Cad Nicholson is our community organizer here in Grant Township, and he has been with us during this fight since day one. So Chad, do you want to say hi to everybody real quick?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Stacy. Good evening, everybody. It's been an honor and a pleasure to work with Stacy and the people of Grant Township over the last 6 years. Thanks.
Chad. Well,
I can go on, Stace, if you want me to embarrass you more.
No, I do not. Thank you. I do not want you to go on. Thank you. Chad is my backup. Chad will sort of fill in the spaces in our story if I miss anything really pertinent and edgy, which could happen. So without further ado, again, my name is Stacy Long. I live in Pennsylvania. I'm president of the East Run Hellbenders Society, which is the community group operating here in Grant Township that sort of pushes the agenda to our local government, which is nice because I'm also part of that local government. I serve as vice chair, supervisor here in Grant Township. For everyone who doesn't live in Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania is a commonwealth. So I don't think a lot of the other states have townships. Am I right about that, Chad?
Some other states do have townships, but the specific structure in Pennsylvania is pretty unique here. So
yeah. So in our structure of government, I am kind of like a queen. So we'll just go with that idea because that's what's kind of pushed me through all this for the last couple of years. But what I want to share with you tonight is the story of Grant Township. How it started and where we are today in our fight against Pennsylvania General Energy, which is a small gas company who is trying to get a Class 2D injection well installed in our township and has been trying to do that since about 2013. So, not to run a spoiler, but I am going to tell you all that as of today, there is still no injection well in Grant Township. So we have kept this thing out for 7 years, which whatever you want to think of me at the end of this call, I mean, it's pretty remarkable. And we in Grant Township could not have done this without the support of the Pennsylvania Community Rights Network and especially without the help of CELDFs. But, okay, so I have a timeline, and I'm going to kind of go through that since it's a 7-year story. I will go as quickly as I can so I don't lose you. But what I want to tell you is in 2013, Pennsylvania General Energy applied for a permit to convert a shallow, or a deep well, rather, here in Grant Township to become a Class 2D injection well. And because it was being repurposed, it needed to have 2 permits, one from our Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection and one from the EPA. Now, when this all happened at the beginning, none of us knew what an injection well was. None of us had ever heard of this. No idea what it was. And my mother, Judy Wanchisen, was instrumental in starting this whole fight. She was the one who was given legal notice that the EPA wanted to have a hearing, wanted to issue a permit for this project, and that it was coming to Grant Township. And she did the research and found out exactly what a Class 2D injection well was, and was absolutely terrified. So what we all thought is that we would go to the hearing that the EPA was holding, and that we would explain to the agents, look, you can't put this in because we are a tiny rural population of 700 people, and all of us rely on well and spring water. Why would you put a project in that would jeopardize that? So we thought, we really, truly believed that it was oversight, that we just needed to explain things. Well, that's not how that works. The hearing was condescending and kind of a joke. So after the hearing, my mother had decided that the permit was probably going to get issued, and she sent out a general SOS. And long story short, she found CELDF, specifically Cad Nicholson. And what she wanted of Chad at that point in our story was she wanted Chad to write an appeal to fight PGE's permit from the EPA. And she and Chad had words over the phone. My mother wound up calling him a son of a bitch because Chad was coming from a different angle. He, being with CELDF for as long as he had been, he realized that the regulating agencies, that it was all a shell game and it was bull. But of course, us being so new to how this all these things worked out, that he was going to need to educate us. So in March of 2013, or yes, March 2014, I'm sorry, Chad came to East Run right after Easter and had a ham dinner with my mom and a number of us from the community. And he explained the black box of death to all of us, which, if you guys don't know what that is, very quickly, it's kind of like Grant Township was at the bottom of the pile. We were boxed in. Everybody was against us. Permits were going to be issued. The project was going to go in. No matter what we pointed out or what we said, it was just going to happen, and we were stuck. But he had a remedy of sorts. So what happened that spring is the East Run Hellbenders Society was formed. And the East Run Hellbenders Society, its first task was to educate our form of local government, our township supervisors, what an injection well was and why they had to act to save the residents. So our township supervisors were luckily into it. Being that we only have like 700 people living in Grant Township, our board of supervisors is only 3. And all 3 of them didn't want an injection well, but all 3 of them were also worried that perhaps what CELDF was proposing was edgy. But in the end, a community bill of rights was drafted from CELDF, and our board of supervisors approved it at a public meeting in June of 2014. This has become sort of a, I don't want to use the word legendary because it just sounds fluffy, but it was kind of a legendary meeting because what it was our tiny cinder block municipal building in Grant Township, full of about 50 of our residents who were all angry, our township supervisors sitting at the front, and then all of the lawyers. There were about 3 of them from the gas company, and I think a few people who worked in the executive administration for the gas company, Pennsylvania General Energy, were there in attendance. And what happened was pretty incredible. The lawyers representing Pennsylvania General Energy said to our supervisors that they didn't want to saber rattle. They were just there wanting to be our good neighbor, and that if we adopted the Community Bill of Rights, it would sue and they would win. And the president of our Board of Supervisors said to the room, who in this room does not want an injection well? And almost every hand went up except for for 2 or 3 people. And he said, all right, we're passing the ordinance. Injection wells are banned in Grant Township. You guys want to come find us? You know where we are. So it was sort of one of those moments where it was like, okay, roadblock 1 has been installed. And that's truly what happened. So 2 months later, Pennsylvania General Energy sued Grant Township, the municipality, in federal court with an 18-page document outlining all of the sins that Grant Township had committed, mostly that it, as a second-class township, had overstepped its powers and was not allowed to constitutionally allowed, not constitutionally allowed to ban the injection well in Grant Township. And so PGE cited that its civil rights were being violated and that its constitutional rights were being violated. And PGE did everything it could to scare Grant Township. It deposed our secretary, who at the time was 22 years old. They wrote all kinds of, it was madness. It was madness for months. It was a very ugly time. But long story short, we fought them off. Let's jump ahead to 2015 to March, and the judge in the federal case was, her name is Judge Baxter, and she works out of the circuit court in Erie, Pennsylvania. And about the end of March, she did rule in favor of PGE, saying that yes, Grant Township had violated its constitutional right to install a Class 2D injection well, and that Grant Township, as a second-class township, was not allowed to do that. And I remember getting the phone call from Chad, and I was at my mother's house at the time, thank goodness, because she being my partner in all this. She and I hurt and feel and work very much the same way. So it was very good that I was there at the time. And I remember just curling up on her bed, and I fell asleep for a full hour, like right after that, because it hurt so much to know that all of the arguments that we had brought up to Judge Baxter, like why Grant Township was so willing to risk bankruptcy and ruin, and you know, that we so badly did not want to have an injection well installed, that, you know, our private citizens, private water sources were at risk. She didn't take any of that into consideration in her ruler. She just went straight Constitution and said, this corporation has the right to do this, and I agree. It was a very bad day. Yes.
Just this is Chad. Just a very quick bit of context on Judge Baxter. So she's a federal judge. She had been appointed both by Obama and was not approved, but then she was reappointed by Trump and was then approved as a full federal judge. But just so folks are aware of who she was and is, she held stock in Halliburton. She held financial stock in Halliburton up until a couple of months before she took the case. But she was then allowed to preside over the case, because as long as you divest your stock in those types in oil and gas companies, you're ethically allowed under federal law to preside over these cases. So it may give some more context to who she is and why she may have ruled the way that she did. And it's all technically legal and ethical under federal judicial guidelines. That's all.
Thanks. Yeah, you're right. Those are important things to know, because you wonder, you keep thinking that you know, everyone gets their day in court and everything's going to be fair. And CELDF presented every argument it could in our favor. How poor we were, how broke we were, how reliant we. She didn't have to take any of that into consideration. She didn't have to worry about what frack waste, nothing. All she had to look at was the fact that the laws say and the laws protect the corporation's right to basically just do whatever it wants, especially in our township, which at that time was a second-class township. So here's where the story gets really fun. Around this time, CELDF had also been talking to us about a concept called home rule. In Pennsylvania government gives any borough, municipality, town, village, city the right to pursue what's called a home rule charter. In that, you get to raise your local system of government to what it is to becoming a home rule municipality. And when you become home rule and when you're working to become home rule, and I'll get into that a little bit more, and Chad will help me with this a bit because he's pretty much an expert, but it's basically like you as a community elect people within your community to serve as a government study commission. That commission examines your current system of government and then makes recommendations to improve upon it. And you write certain laws or certain ideas that are specific to govern where you live. So in this case, CELDF proposed that if we pursued becoming home rule, what would benefit Grant Township possibly would be banning the injection well. And it could be used as another tool to fight industry and keep PGE from installing its terrible toxic radioactive project. So while Judge Baxter made her terrible ruling, all of this was on a back burner, and we were very motivated to pursue home rule, which we did. And in Pennsylvania, home rule takes 2 full election cycles. You have to get a bunch of people who live in your community, who are taxpayers and voters in your community, excuse me, and they have to become elected study commissioners, and then they work and they make a draft of a home rule charter. That draft is publicly available. All of the meetings are available publicly, and everyone can examine all of the paperwork that the Government Study Commission generates. And what Grant Township did is that summer, we drafted a home rule charter specific to the needs of Grant Township. It is a wonderful document. If you Google home rule charter Grant Township, it should come up. If it doesn't, please contact anyone from the National Community Rights Network. I will make sure they get it. It is probably one of the things in my life that I am most proud to have participated in, other than marriage to my husband, Mark. But it is an 8-page document. It is largely rights-based. It makes corporate personhood not a thing in Grant Township. In Grant Township, we do not recognize corporations as people. We bestow rights of nature to our watershed and our surroundings, saying that it has the right to legally evolve naturally. We bestow civil rights to every single person who lives in Grant Township. And largely, we made the permanent depositing of frack waste illegal in Grant Township. And I'm so sorry, I don't remember the numbers, but by an overwhelming landslide, our residents voted to install our home rule charter in November of 2015, which was about 1 month after Judge Baxter made her terrible ruling. so she took the opportunity of having our community Bill of Rights keep the injection well out. But we forced home rule in front of her face and said, we have become a new system of government and we are banning this. And it happened within the course of 3 weeks. And it was the best egg on your face thing there could be. And I will also tell you today that that home rule charter is the single thing that is keeping the injection well out of Grant Township, but I can go into that a bit later. So,
hey, Stace.
yes, please.
Yeah, this is Chad.
Tired, so go ahead.
I'm sorry, just a couple of quick things on the charter, just to emphasize a couple things you mentioned. I think you said it, but it's one of the things that is most interesting about Grant Township for me is that the judge ruled against the original law. And 1 month later, the people overwhelmingly voted in a new law that said, we don't recognize this federal judge's opinion. We don't recognize her ruling. We don't recognize her order. We are going to actually reinstate a new law that overrides what she says and reinstates the ban on injection wells. So it wasn't ceding anything to Baxter or that court. It was saying, look, we know we're the legitimate decision makers here. We're going to pass a new law, and we don't really give a shit about what she said. We're going to do something different. And I think, Stacy, you mentioned you didn't remember what the specific stats were. It was 73% of the voters in the township that voted in this charter. And, you know, a lot of the work that I do with communities isn't political. I don't ask people generally whether they're Republicans or Democrats or things like that. I think, you know, Stace, correct me if I'm wrong, by most measures, Grant Township would be considered conservative, and yet it voted in this charter by an overwhelming majority that gave rights to ecosystems and that banned corporations from having constitutional rights or privileges within the township. Some pretty radical stuff in a place that a lot of people would not have expected it to happen. And the last thing I just wanted to emphasize was this was, as far as we're aware, the first rights-based constitution that's been passed anywhere in the United States. So usually people think of constitutions as, you know, state or federal, but these charters are actually local constitutions. They're recognized by the courts as such. And this was an exercise not just in opposing the injection well, it was also about this community coming together, as they said, to figure out what it was that they wanted, how they wanted to be governed, what their system of government was going to look like. And that's something that I think a lot of communities don't consider. It's not just what are we against, but what would a sane, just system of government in the place that we live look like? And I think the Grant Township Charter and the work that they did over that year was really instrumental in providing a blueprint for other communities. So I just wanted to kind of lift that perspective up of what the work that they did. It wasn't just about the injection well, it was about a new form of government. It also took a look at what the federal courts did and said, no, we don't respect your opinion. We're going to do something different. And it was also in a place that a lot of people wouldn't expect something like this to happen. And so I think it's an inspiration for communities who say, what can we do? You know, we have Trump as president, or we have this or that. There's always excuses of why people choose not to act. But a lot of this stuff happened in a place that many people would think is very unlikely. And I just want to bring that perspective to the story. Done.
Yes, thank you. That's perfect. And every word of it is true. This area is very blue collar. A lot of the people who are employed here do work for gas companies as well tenders, not necessarily for fracking. There isn't a whole lot of fracking in Indiana County, but pretty nearly everyone in Grant Township has a story to tell about how the gas company screwed them over property rights one way or another. And so no one was willing to give the gas company carte blanche on installing a questionable dump. And something else you need to know about Grant Township is we are in the middle of nowhere. This is a perfect place for a dump. No one lives here. It is literally 23 square miles of fields and trees and nothing. There's not one business. There's only about 250 households. Most everyone is poor or very old. Yeah, so it's an ideal place for a project like that. but it's also bullshit because PGE is a serial polluter. It's one of the, even despite its business record of doing business only in Pennsylvania, it is the top 20 polluter. And this is all from state records. And so that's not even like counting what doesn't make it onto state records. But those were serious motivating factors on why we did what we did. We knew that if the injection well were to come here, Grant Township would be ruined. And so in installing a home rule charter, we were taking control of what happened here, and we were stating why it was so important, that our ecosystem needed to be able to stay pristine, and that our people's water wells and springs needed to stay as they were. And those are the things that are important to Grant Township. So let's skip to springtime in 2016. Our lawyers at CELDF, they're always wonderful to us, but they never, the rosy side of the picture is always like plan B. You know, it's like, this is probably what's going to happen. So you should mentally prepare. And so one of the best ideas that our lawyers at CELDF had presented us with was a civil disobedience ordinance, which our board of supervisors at that point, I had become an elected supervisor for Grant Township. In fact, I won that position the same election as the home rule charter by a really stupid amount. But you should know that no one in Grant Township wants to be township supervisor. Nobody wants the job. Grant Township doesn't have any money, and our roads are in bad shape, and nobody likes being screamed at for hardly any money. So, but I stepped up to the job, and so now I'm elected township supervisor, and I am proud to say that I was one of the board members who passed a civil disobedience ordinance unanimously, which state, and you could look this up too on Google. What our civil disobedience ordinance does is it legalizes civil disobedience and direct action in Grant Township, meaning if our home rule charter fails to keep PGE's toxic project out of its borders, we welcome anyone outside of Grant Township or anyone in Grant Township to defend our home rule charter, being that it was democratically the will of the people, what the people of Grant Township wanted, to defend against the injection well, and that person or that group could not be sued by PGE or whoever for defending the charter. And it was totally an offensive move, and all three of us on the board at that time agreed that it was brilliant. And Chad has told me a couple of times that it's first in the nation kind of ordinance, which to me isn't like the fluffy part. To me, it's just that extra thing that freaked out the corporation suing us. That was the silver lining in the whole thing. And Chad, do you have anything to add to that? Because it was a pretty ballsy thing to have had happen here in the middle of nowhere, Grant Township.
Yeah, not a lot to add other than just to reiterate and emphasize how ballsy it was. And that, I think this is a part of a bigger lesson for other communities if they're looking to Grant Township for inspiration, which is not continuing to wait for a response from either the corporations or from the state, but continuing to come up with really creative ways to scare the shit out of them and make them wonder what's actually going on in Grant Township. Who are these people? Like, they think they can box them in and being kind of bumpkins and poor and conservative and whatever. And meanwhile, there's a unanimous vote from their board of supervisors to legalize any form of nonviolent direct action when it comes to protecting the community's water. And so I think just to emphasize your point, Stace, and that's not the answer. The law itself, I think, in my opinion, it's the action, it's the energy behind it that really scared people. And then in, you know, subsequent court filings that we've had over the last couple of years, it always comes up from both the state, like the Attorney General is very concerned about it, has brought it up, as well as PGE, the corporation. They always mention that, like that Grant Township did this. It got their attention, and they're not really sure what to do about it. And they're always asking for the court to make a ruling on it and this and that. But of course, the whole point of it was, we don't care what the court is going to rule or say about this ordinance, because the point is that we're expecting the court to rule against us. We're expecting the court to tell us we don't have the right to protect our community, but we know we have the right. And so we're actually frontally calling out the court or the state, the Attorney General, whoever it is, when they try to tell us we don't have the right to protect our community. We're saying, no, actually we do. And we're going to not charge people if they come in here to do what we know is right. So it's about staying on offense, and it's about continuing to assert the legitimacy of the community's right to defend itself. And I think just one last quick thing on the legal side, you know, folks often wonder, well, how's it going to be enforced? Because of course the state is going to press criminal charges if people get arrested. We don't know how it's going to work. The state's mentioned this was, you know, first in the nation. So if it ever comes to that, we're not sure what's going to happen. But then you have another conflict between the community's rights and the community's values versus the state that's saying this community doesn't have the authority to protect itself. So it's another chess piece, but it's a pretty big one. And I think, yeah, there's legal options. People always wonder how that's going to work, but I think the biggest piece is just continuing to stick a finger in the eye of the people that are telling this community they can't do what they know is right. So that's all, Stacy.
Thanks. That was perfect. It makes us sound so. It was probably the most creative legal strategy that I could think of. And I don't know. I mean, I know a whole lot more about legal strategies now than I ever thought I ever would in my life. Just because now, at the tender age of 50, I understand aspects of federal lawsuits and Commonwealth Court, which is a state lawsuit. Both a bummer, but you know, I guess you could just say, you know, well, it was a new skill. But let's jump ahead. Yes, go ahead.
I know this is such a great story, but it just for the sake of time, can we try to wrap it up in the next couple minutes?
Yep, I can wrap it up in 2 minutes.
You rock.
Yeah. So what I was going to end with, well, not end with, but so that was 2016. In 2017, the DEP sued us for our home rule charter. That in Pennsylvania is called the Department of Environmental Protection. That agency, the regulating agency, who would be monitoring, you know, the topographic aspects of the injection well in Grant Township, sued us because we dared to pass a law in Grant Township that said injection wells, this permitted activity that the state engages in, is now illegal. So the DEP sued us, and that created a ton of backlash, which will surprise you all when I tell you where that is now. Cad, do you wanna sort of end that? Because I think I want to end on how the DEP sued us and where that lawsuit is today and where we are legally.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot to add. Just to emphasize, I think where you're going, that the Department of Environmental Protection sued Grant Township for trying to protect its environment. I mean, I've never been on a call or in a meeting where I can't emphasize that enough. The State Department of Environmental Protection sued Grant Township for trying to protect its environment. Like, I think I could fill up an entire hour just saying that over and over again. So that's all I want to say to this.
Yes. So, yes. So we've had a number of hearings and a number of things, but now it's 2020, and in March of this year, out of the blue, pre-plague, I get this text from my CELDF lawyer, Karen Hoffman, who's wonderful, and she sent me a text saying that the DEP has rescinded its permit, citing your home rule charter is the reason. And I texted her back and said, you should really stop joking with me. Because I was like, I read it like 8 times and I was like, she's absolutely kidding with me. And she's not that kind of person, but I just couldn't believe it. Why would the regulating agency have sued us in 2017 and then all of a sudden rescind the permit and say, oh, these people put out a home rule charter and made a local law and we're recognizing that local law is a good law. They don't want an injection well, so fine, we can't issue a permit. But honest to God, everyone on this call, that is true. That is what happened. And that's where we are today. Grant Township lost, we didn't win a single thing in the federal case. We lost the whole shebang. But in the Commonwealth Court case, the DEP, who had sued us in 2017, rescinded its permit to PGE, citing our home rule charter as the reason. And there's no permit, which means there's no injection well. So that's where we are today. And it's all because everyone in this community, working with CELDFs and the Board of Supervisors and the community group, the East Run Hellbenders Societies, have band together in one single focus that Grant Township cannot have an injection well in it. And we've exhausted pretty much all of the legal possibilities, and here we are today with no injection well.
Yeah.
How did you do? Did I miss anything, Chad?
Yeah, just one quick thing, and Stacy, I don't think you mentioned it in this call, but something that I've heard you say many times, because there's a lot of risk for you personally, as a supervisor as well as a citizen. There's a lot of risk for the community. There's been bankruptcy, some legal stuff we didn't get into, which included attorney's fees being awarded against the township.
Yeah.
Two CELDF attorneys have also been sanctioned for $52,000 in this case for defending Grant Township. In Grant Township, there was a judgment against the township for $103,000 in attorney's fees, even though Grant Township only takes in $32,000 a year in total tax base. So just say there's huge risks here, but it's getting into some of the weeds, but you've always said that the threat of the injection well was more scary to you than the threat of bankruptcy, than the legal threats, potentially even the threat of jail. That what the injection well meant was far, far worse than any of the legal stuff that could go on. And I think that's something that is important for other communities to hear, because there's always the legal concerns, like what's going to happen, bankruptcy, financial liability. And it's really a question of what's most important to you and how much are you willing to risk in order to defend what is most important to you. That's all.
That is absolutely true. And just to be consistent, I will repeat. It is absolutely 110% true that there is no lawsuit, there is no corporation, there is no personal lawsuit, there is nothing more frightening to the majority of the people of Grant Township than an injection well, than having a government regulating agency in charge of how your water is clean or how it is cleaned if it's contaminated. That all of that comes as a priority when faced with how your life could be if an injection well comes to your community. So yes, you're right. Absolutely. So ta-da!
Thank you.
7 years later, no injection well. There you go.
So that, as you all can see, this is why this story is so moving and compelling for us in Pennsylvania. This has been something that we've been following for 7 years and watching every turn and every event and the ups and downs of this case as it happens. And it's something that we wanted to share with all of you as well, because it's a lot of hard work for Chad and Stacy, and the fact that their community of 700 people have rose up and managed to keep that injection well out of their towns when they literally target small rural communities because they don't think they can rise up. And so this is something that is very meaningful in our movement and worth following. There are 2 links that are on the Zoom invite for anybody who's interested in reading more. And if you want any more information, again, you can reach out to us at the PACRN or the NCRN, and we can help you out with that. So with no further ado, I will turn it open to questions. If somebody has a question or would like to discuss things with Stacy or Chad, please either raise your hand physically or write your question in the chat if you'd rather do that, and we will read them. Right now, Will Perkins asks, do you feel a Trojan horse? So I'm going to refer the questions to you, Stacy or Chad.
A Trojan horse. I might need more details unless you understand the question, Chad.
This is Will.
I will.
The reason I'm asking that is that, you know, as in any story, particularly a story with this much power connected with it, it's tough to say, hey, we won and it was easy. Well, I'll tell you what, I don't trust anything anymore. And I mean, was there some economic implications that came into this that caused them to roll over like a sheep?
Honestly, we have no idea. We have no idea. None at all. I can tell you, Grant Township was willing to risk all that it had because we don't have much. We don't have money. There are no businesses here. We didn't have, there wasn't. The big joke when PGE threatened to sue us in public at one of our public meetings, it was, okay, so it wants to sue us. What's it going to do? Take away our garbage day. There's no garbage day in Grant Township. We don't have anything. We have nothing. So it was like, we don't have anything. So if you want to come and take something, I guess you're going to have to sue us in court to come and get it, which is exactly what happened. So maybe, but what's really funny, Will, not funny, but what's tragic, it's like all of this in PGE's eyes or mind boils down to money. PGE wanted its cheap toxic waste dump and it wanted to put it in Grant Township. And Grant Township was like, no, we want to go on as before. We don't want to have our wells and springs compromised. We don't want to worry about this stuff, so we're banning it. The line between those two things is PG school doesn't understand why we're so upset. And we don't understand why PG can't realize that this isn't freaking about money. We don't care about money. We just want to know that our lives are going to be peaceful and our water's going to stay clean.
So basically, what they were wanting to do then was to stuff their fracking waste into wells in your township, correct?
Correct.
They weren't actually drilling for gas or any fossil fuels or anything like that.
Nope. Nope. It was repurposing a deep well that's about a mile deep. So it's a well that used to produce gas, but now is not producing enough gas to be profitable for the company. So what they want to do is they want to use the casing and all that crap, and they want to blow frac waste down it, and then it will be stored underground where it will never touch any of our aquifers, and it will never kill any of our fish, and it will never kill any of our bugs, and it will never be seen ever again, ever, ever. Never.
Well, it's, I mean, as Bill and Greg could both tell you, because they've been active with the Columbus Bill of Rights group a lot longer than I have. It's basically the same thing that we're facing, only with probably a much larger number of wells, and right smack dab in the middle of our water table.
So, Will, Bill Lyons actually had the next question about is BNE suing further?
Kara, if I can, I want to follow up on Will's question, and I'll try to tie in Bill's and then give it back to Stace. But if I understand the Trojan horse question, it's you know, why did the DEP reverse course?
Right.
Is that okay? So and are we wary of something else happening? DEP hasn't told us why they sued Grant Township for 3 years and then all of a sudden decided one morning that they were like, we don't want to sue them anymore. We're gonna remove the permit. They haven't exposed their reasoning for that, and we assume because they know that there's going to be further litigation, which is actually ongoing. One of the other legal things we didn't get into because the Grant case is so complex is that Grant also is countersuing DEP right now, and that case is ongoing, and the court is allowing that case to happen. And basically what Grant's saying is like, our charter is a more important law than the state laws regulating oil and gas development in our community because DEP has failed in its capacities to protect the environment. So we have no reason to trust the DEP. That's why we've had to do the charter. That's a whole separate conversation. We can get into it if folks are interested. What I think has happened, and again, DEP has not told us, and as Stace mentioned, we don't really know, is a couple things went on. Number one, when the DEP originally sued Grant Township in 2017, they asked for the whole charter basically to be tossed wholesale, to just have it be dumped within, they filed what's called preliminary objections, which is like, this charter is such complete bullshit that it shouldn't even exist. And we're asking the court to basically toss it wholesale. The court did not do that. And the court said, no, actually there's a legitimate reason for them passing it, and that's what we're still fighting over. So that happened. They didn't get their immediate win. I think, they thought they were going to get a quick victory and the charter would be gone. Back to, handing out oil and gas policy for every municipality in the state. A couple other things that have happened is, as I think you mentioned, economic reasons. Prices of gas are lower. And there's a whole, big question of what's actually happened with oil and gas development, as well as the DEP being underfunded. And this is a case that's turned into a big morass for them. Like, this is going on 3 or 4 years at this point, and now we're getting into some pretty deep discovery because of Grant's case against them. So I think they're wanting help. The last thing I think that happened is the DEP is being investigated for criminal activity by the state attorney general right now in some pipeline cases. So the FBI is involved, the attorney general is involved. So, this isn't for like everything. And, I don't want to say this is like they're going to actually find criminal involvement, but the DEP's got bigger stuff going on right now because the FBI is crawling up their butt. So, I think they're wanting to dump some stuff elsewhere, and this would be an easy one. So I think those factors together may be what's happening. Last thing is going into what Bill said is PGE suing further. There's basically 3 legal fronts happening right now. Number one is that Grant is still suing the DEP. That case is going on. There's discovery. Number 2, obviously PGE, the oil and gas company, was not happy that DEP rescinded their permit. And so PGE is now appealing that permit rescission to the appellate court for the DEP. So that's going on. And then the third thing is PGE suing further. Not yet. We expect them to, though. And basically what we think is PGE is going to say, well, DEP's messed this case up. And so now we're going to have to do it ourselves. And I know these acronyms all sound the same and they're hard to keep straight, but we would expect PGE to sue again. Could be tomorrow. It could be sometime this summer. And actually sue over Grant's charter. So there's a case against the DEP, there's the appellate hearing, and then PGE could sue again. But as of today, there is no lawsuit from PGE against the township.
So they've actually, it's what it looks like, and they're licking their wounds and going home.
We have some more questions on the board in about 10 more minutes. So if I would like to go and respond to Maria Saus had a question. Can any municipality have a charter as its government document, or does that vary by state?
I would say that varies by state. I don't know if every state has a home rule option. Do you know?
Yes, not every state has a home rule option, so that does vary by state. But I want to make a distinction again with these types of local laws is when we talk about whether you're a Dillon's rule state, a home rule state, or things like that, that conversation gets very legalistic and it gets kind of put in the weeds of what authority do we have? What authority has the state given us? Can we become home rule? Can we not? And I think it's important to distinguish that Grant Township basically exploited a loophole that the state never intended the community to be able to exploit, but that it doesn't matter in many ways what your state authority tells you can or can't do. It's a matter of how far you're willing to go. So you can pass a charter, but how are you going to legitimize it? And then how are you going to enforce it? And that's the question I think that it all comes down to, is how far are you willing to go to enforce what's important to the community? So it's less about what the state says you can or can't do. What are you willing to do to actually defend and protect what you love?
And Mindy Zlotnick had a question. Did they go somewhere else and set up injection wells someplace else?
That I don't know. Do you know? I don't. PGE is mostly, they frack in Pennsylvania. And then I'm so sorry to everyone on the call who lives in Ohio. PGE notoriously sends most of its frack waste to Ohio currently, from what I know.
PGE has not operated any injection wells. This would be their first, which is another reason for concern in Grant Township, which is you have one of the top 10 polluting, permit violating oil and gas companies in Pennsylvania that now wants to basically do a guinea pig injection well in Grant Township. So PGE has not operated any. But if the bigger question is, where's the oil and gas waste going? Yeah, it's what Stacy said. Right now, Ohio is like, hey, bring it here.
I'm sorry, Ohio.
Are there any other questions? Doug, did you have a question earlier?
No, I thought that was an excellent discussion and presentation on what happened in Grant Township. That was very comprehensive. And what comes to my mind, looking at all this, can't lose faith in some of the principles that were founded in the way our system of law was created. And I really think that since we really did have local self-government as part of the founding principle of forming a democracy with a Republican form of government, that it just really strikes me in my own thinking anyway, that this is why we're looking at this case the way it is, because they can't wreck the system that they can't kick the chair legs out underneath themselves. If we're going to have government that's going to rule and it's going to take care of and do its job, it's got to stand to what the founding principles were based on, not what the whims of wealthy people or corporations or whoever thinks they have the power, who they can pay off, or, you know what I mean? That's where all the corruption comes in. And this country is getting loaded with it. And I think we have to keep our faith with the local self-government. It's just like what happened also with the Lake Erie Bill of Rights. I mean, the people made it happen. It was the love, it was the true patriotism displayed by the people in doing this. And it has power. And you can't ever let yourself down to think that, oh no, it's not going to work. Oh, my house sticks are blown down again. No, this is real. And I really commend what you did there in Grant Township in many ways. And, you know, Chad, I know Chad, and I think I'd met Stacy once at our NCRN meeting.
Right. We may have time for one more question.
If there isn't a question, I would want to leave with this one idea that I really want to impress upon everyone, is that Grant Township is really no place special. There's nothing going on here. I'm no one special. I'm a 50-year-old graphic designer who had civics class in 9th grade. I didn't know what home rule was. I didn't understand local government. I had never been to a township meeting. But I will tell you that the threat of this injection well in this area and knowing Chad and working with Chad and CELDF has really opened my eyes to how awful how awful the American system of government is. And I don't know if that's good or whatever, but I do know that I've used it in a positive way to help the community stay the way that it is, and not have an injection well in it. So I do want to impress that I'm not an amazing person.
I am going to interrupt here, Stacy, because I full-heartedly disagree with your statement. We can fist fight in the alley later. It takes a special person to lead a community, but it takes a special community to get together and make these things happen. So your story, and you and Chad and the teams that worked so hard to make this happen, it's an inspiration to all of us and the fights that we're involved with, and encouraging that there is a long-term goal, and things that they don't come. They come with a lot of losses before they come with the win. And understanding that and seeing your story really brings that out, that sometimes you have to go through a lot of turbulent times. You know it's not going to work in your favor. But over time, with persistence and determination, that there is positive outcomes. There are good things that are happening, and that our movement is taking a really good direction, and we just have to wait for it. So that being said,
very, very quickly, I just want to embarrass Stacy a little bit more. And the only reason I can do it is because she's not on camera and she's not here to get mad at me. But yes, that is an exceptional, special thing happening with her in that community. And it's taught me a lot about what love and devotion and care really is.
Don't make me cry.
That's so, I've never heard that side of you, Chad.
No.
So beautiful and warm and fuzzy. I feel really fuzzy. Thanks.
I feel fuzzy too. I love Chad like he loves me, so you should all know that too.
So our next
working like this does make you bond with people in a very deep and trustful way, and I feel that way with Chad. Not that, but it's true. You can't do work like this without absolute trust in who you're working with.
And our new community rights network, Virginia, is offering a couple series. Those are listed on your screen right now. We're excited and about what they're doing in Virginia and the things that they're putting together, and we'd like to share this invitation with all of you on this call. So I don't know much about this, Heidi. This is your department. So your state, your community, your network, you want to give a little teaser on what you're doing here?
Yeah, well, actually, Mindy's going to be presenting this if she wants to unmute while I'm saying a few things about this. She's got a great, inspiring PowerPoint ready with lots of great videos. And she was invited by the Unitarian Church. It's a little coalition, the First Unitarian Church in Richmond, Virginia, and the Living Water Community Center and the Foundation for Family and Community Healing are sponsoring her to speak July 1st, and you can see that they have another event on July 16th. Mindy, do you want to say something?
I'm just really excited about it. I had a tech meeting with the woman who invited me today, and she said that she's gotten in touch with the National Unitarian Universalist Earth Ministry, and they're very interested. They had never heard about the rights of nature, and they're very interested, and we don't know where that's going to lead, but she's hoping that they're going to be sending people to hear it. So we'll see what happens. I think every time there's some sort of outreach like this, I'm just hoping the right people will be there. So you're all invited to come, and I welcome feedback totally. So it would be
you'll
really,
get it.
really there. It will be really good to hear what you say. It's not a very long, it's relatively not a very long presentation, but there'll be room for questions and answers.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys, and thanks for sharing your new series with us, Mindy. That's exciting. So again, look forward to hearing you all with the Toledo's Lake Erie Bill of Rights on next month. It's always going to be the last Wednesday of the month for our calls. If you have any suggestions for other calls or ways that we can improve this for you, we're happy to hear them. And other than that, I thank you all for being here and have enjoyed your company.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Great. Thank you, Stacy.
No, you're welcome. And thanks, Cad, for helping me, but mostly thank you all for staying on and listening to all of that. I'm glad that you did.
Oh, loved hearing you and Chad's story. It never gets old.
Yeah.
Yeah. Until you live it. And